All right, good evening. We're going to get started here. Thanks for coming out. I am Matt Eland, and this is the CentralOhio.net developer group. If you're not familiar with us, good job getting here or attending online. But we meet the fourth Thursday of every month. And tonight we have Mike Eaton talking about building awesome console apps in .NET using Spectre.Console. So we are streaming this online. We are a hybrid user group, so folks can watch later or live. So if you're here, please device responsibly. Don't be downloading whatever you might be downloading. I was going to say Quake, but I think it's been a few years since Quake came out at this point.
It's also been a few years since Windows Phone was a thing.
It'll be back. If you came here through an invite through a friend, you can find us at Meetup. We have an alias, CentralOhio.net should take you there. Right now it is not, so I got to figure out what's going on with my redirect there. But that should be working soon enough again. And again, we meet the fourth Thursday of every month, aside from the last 2 months of the year, because the fourth Thursdays of those 2 months tend to be a little problematic for us. This is also the greatest challenge I have in hosting this user group, is I can never remember the fourth Thursday of each month. Sorry, Mike.
Math is hard.
We've got a couple seats in the front on the wing there. So this is run by Alan, myself, Sam Gomez, who just got back from Vegas and is a little jet lagged, so he was speaking out there. And this is our third meeting of the year. Next month, we should have Open Source SAML Takes You Places with our friend Sam Basso. I need to confirm with Sam, so this may change, but this is our current plan. If there's something that's interesting to you, AI, Blazor, whatever is semantic kernel, whatever is interesting to you, talk to us and we'll see if we can get somebody to talk about it. And again, we are on YouTube. You can go out and find our content. I'm happy to brag that we have over 310 subscribers, so you can take a guess at how many exact subscribers we have. 311. Sorry, I edited this earlier and my saves didn't work out, so that's okay. But we have a lot of good stuff out there. We're also on Twitter, though not as often as we ought to be. And we are on LinkedIn, though certainly not as often as we ought to be, as Mike found out as he tried to ping us this week. But we also would like to thank our sponsors, Improving, for hosting us and giving us a speaker. We appreciate that, and the pizza. We also thank the .NET Foundation, which is paying for our meetup costs and the like. And then JetBrains gives us licenses to give away for our raffles. This month we also have a book sponsor from Pact Publishing. We'll be giving away a copy of actually my book. So give that away at the end here today. Other user groups in the area, we have Columbus.js, which meets the first Wednesday of each month. That meets here in this room. There's a trend on user groups, as you will find out. Mike, what's tech support?
So the tech support meetup is for the softer side of tech. So we don't talk about code. We talk about a lot of things in and around what we do. We've had talks on starting your own business and how to stand out in the crowd, and we had a panel about how to deal with this economy, those types of things. So all those kinds of things. Next month, April 10, we will be talking about things that juniors or new developers should be doing in their first role. So that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, that's great. I got a lot of questions on being a junior and succeeding just before the meeting started. There's also CBus Pass for the data-minded folks, talking about databases, SQL Server, all that good stuff. Azure SQL, I imagine. And then Drake, you want to tell us what this CBus Azure thing is?
Sure. So the Azure groups come back to Columbus, so we're doing a bit of DevOps, mostly focused on the Azure platform. We actually rotate locations. We're not always here. And this next month, we're having the Azure Global Community Conference. So we're going to have a free conference with pizza, 6 speakers on a Saturday. More information to come. It's going to be the same location as Code and Copy on one of their off weeks. We've not posted yet because we only found out about this halfway through March. So we're scrambling, but we will have 6 speakers. It's going to be a good time.
It's not as scrambling as you think it is. I actually get to speak there. I'm speaking on using AI to build ridiculous things. So that's a lot of fun. other things in the community, we may have a new group starting up soon around CBus DevOps, so look for that. And then Stir Trek is just a month and change away. Early May, we are meeting at the AMC Easton, just that way. A lot of fun, good sessions. You get to hear a lot of the things that are interesting, and then you get popcorn and a movie. Movie is the first Star Wars movie. Well, not the first Star Wars movie, but the new first Star Wars movie. Was it Phantom Menace? Yeah, the one that you skip in machete order if you follow that practice. But it should be fun just to go back there and revisit those old days. You can find out about it at Spectre.Console. You can register. The rates for this conference increase the closer we get to the event, so I encourage you to get your tickets now, or get your employer to get your tickets now before they go up in price. But it's absolutely worth it. It's a great time, and it should be fun. Okay. So who here is currently hiring? Some degree or another. We've got a couple hands. Okay. So Alan, what you hiring for?
All the usual, .NET.
The usual, .NET, Java, script. Yep. Okay. And Jeffrey? I ask because you take a bite of pizza.
I'll dramatically pause while I wipe my mouth after the bite of pizza. Development, data folks, DevOps folks.
Okay, very cool. And you were over at Manifest Solutions.
Manifest Solutions.
Yeah. And Alan is at Improving. Cool. So speaking of improving, house rules here. Feel free to get up and get extra pizza, get candy, get snacks, get another drink. Even while Mike's talking, we don't mind. Just be quiet about it and polite. If you need to get out and use the bathroom, I believe the men's room should still be unlocked, but ladies' room has a code of 5600, which is the code for this building, so 5600 star. And then I need to uncross out that ask questions. That was for our last November thing. So feel free to heckle Mike with questions as he's talking. I'm sure you would love for people to get answers sooner rather than later in your talk.
Sure.
Cool. And so with that, I gotta introduce Mike. So Mike Eaton is going to be talking to us about building awesome console applications in .NET using Spectre.Console. I first talked with Mike about this October-ish last year. And I had to do some looking into what Spectre.Console is. But since then, I have built maybe 3-4 applications around Spectre.Console, and it has changed the way that I look at building a new application. It's awesome. I won't spoil it too much because that's your thing.
He may answer some questions when you ask them. So.
I may ask the hard questions. Who knows? But Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for presenting tonight.
Right on. Thank you. All right. Let me just get my Mac plugged in. So I was thinking the last time I spoke at CONDG, good grief, Microsoft building. This group used to get big attendance, but it was probably 11 or 12 years ago. Yeah. Was the last time I was down here. I had a gig, and I don't want that view. I want that view. There we go. But it's been a long time. Even though I bugged Alan about it. It was Matt that invited me, Alan. I'm just saying. So we're going to talk about .NET apps in Spectre.Console. I got about an hour of content here. So depending on how things go, most of the code is in slides because the demo gods are awful. So we're going to keep that in mind. I may hit the console. We may do some things live, but that'll depend on how things go. As we go. So I do work for Improving. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. We get the front lines off so it's easier to read to the screen. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Normally my slides are white with black on them, and this deck is the opposite, so I apologize for them being hard to see. I work for Improving. It's a great company. I've been here about 18 months, and again, they're awesome for sponsoring community events like this. Thanks to the pizza giving us the space. So we're always hiring, like Alan said. So if you want to talk to anyone else about Improving, talk to Alan, talk to me. I think Kyle's still floating around somewhere. It's a great place. So in this session, this is really an introduction. This isn't going to be a super duper deep technical dive because I am, in this case, pretty much an enthusiast here. The applications I've written using it, I mean, most of them are for me, but I'll talk about kind of the evolution of how I found it and that. So this started out. A lot of you in here probably have similar backgrounds to me. Started, 30-ish years ago, back when it was DOS and Windows 3.1 and those types of things. So the applications, a lot of them were DOS programs, and that's how I got my start. Was writing these DOS programs in QBasic and then QuickBasic, and I just have this affinity toward console apps. There's just something deep inside that I love. The simplicity of a console app. But about a year and a half ago, no, about 2 years ago, I wanted to learn this library because it was cool, and I kept seeing it pop up on GitHub, and so every year I do. Well, every year. For the last 2 years, I've done the .NET Advent blog post. So there's a couple of websites that do these posts around December. And so the last couple of years, I've written these posts. And so a couple of years ago, I did one on, there's a great pragmatic programmer book called Exercises for Programmers by Brian Hogan. It's a fantastic book. Lots of little, hey, write this little program to do X. And so I picked one. And it was a heart rate calculator, and I'll show you what this looks like. But I'm also a lazy developer, as many of us are, and I knew this was going to be at the console, and and we'll talk about kind of where just using normal .NET methods are cool, and where using something like Spectre.Console comes into play. But I started to build this blog, write this blog post, and write the demo app, and Spectre just made it super easy. So I've done that a couple more times since then. But we all probably at some point use some kind of console app, right? Whether it's something like NPM or even the .NET console app, Git at the command line, Docker, the Azure CLI, or if you're into hating yourself, the Azure PowerShell app. But we use this stuff all the time. And, sorry, things are out of sync here. So a console application runs inside a terminal host that runs a shell. So for me, on my Mac, I run a shell called Z shell inside of iTerm. If you're on Windows, you're probably running Windows Terminal now. Now, I will tell you, full disclosure here, the last time I gave this talk, I did it on my Windows machine, which is my desktop. I have no Windows laptops. So I did it on my Windows machine, and so I was getting everything set up today to kind of run through it, and I'm like, this all should still work. But I do everything. Most days I open up a terminal, and that's where I spend my time. But maybe you're in Git Bash, maybe you're in PowerShell, those types of things. So this is an example. So my blog is written in Jekyll, which is essentially a console app, right? So on the right-hand side is the runner, and then on the left-hand side is the runner. On the left-hand side is, of course, I'm using Git at the command line. So this may be a similar setup to what a lot of people use if you use Docker. So I love splitting my terminal window into little pieces because it's just really productive for me. So this is 4 or 5 different places where I can run a console app. A couple of those are Docker. In the bottom right with all the red, I ran some failing integration tests. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. These are the types of applications that I use that are all pretty ugly. Like if you think about it, they're just kind of, there's nothing nice about them. But in .NET, there's a lot of things you can do natively. And again, a lot of people don't do this kind of thing. When I learned .NET, when it came out, this is one of the things I would always, everything started with a console app. And so typically when I'm learning something new, I start with a console app. If it's something I need to do that's simple, I start with a console app. I don't ever start with a web app or anything. So .NET New console gets me started, and I can do things like this. I can make different colored text. It's kind of hacky. I don't like it, but I can do things like that. I can change different color. I can change words to different colors. But there are a lot of things that if I wanted to get really fancy, I'd have to dig into essentially Windows APIs to really get into some of this stuff. But the code to do that looks a lot like that. Now, a lot of this code is demo code, and I know that if I were doing this for a client, I'd probably wrap some of this into methods to make it easier to do. But you can see that at the top, where's my mouse? I can set the background color and the foreground color to different things. But that lasts for the rest of the session unless I reset the console back to what I want it to be set to. So if I wanted to do something for a client application and I wanted the header, let's say when you run the app, it typically comes up with some kind of this is the name of the program, written by so-and-so, copyright so-and-so. I could have it a different color. But if I forgot to reset it, everything is going to be that color. So in this case, everything could be blue. And in fact, it is white on blue until I do a reset color to put it back to the default. And then if I want to do things like individual letters, then it gets it gets kind of bad because you got to do it for every single letter. You have to set the color. This is native .NET stuff here. So it does get kind of gross actually when you're doing it this way. Not that you can't. So same thing about asking for input. I can have a console application using native.NET that says, hey, what's your name? How old are you? Pretty easy using console write line, console read line, console read, those types of things. But there are some difficulties here because you end up writing a lot of repetitive code. And you end up, especially if you want to start validating the input, then you're writing even more code to validate that input. So for example, here's that, right? So I'm going to do a console write line to ask my question. I'm going to do a console read or a read line to read the data back in. And then I'm probably going to have to parse it to make sure they entered a valid thing, right? If I'm asking for age, I want to make sure it's an int. If it's a name, I want to make sure they didn't enter numbers, that kind of thing. So I'm going to want to do some validation of what they entered because you can't trust anything a user enters. So that's what this would look like. And it's really that if statement. You can see I try to do a parse and say, hey, is that age an integer? And it's kind of ugly. But these are things you can do with native console. If you dig into the documentation, though, there's a lot of things that are very dependent on the OS. As you can see here, so these are attributes that are used within the .NET runtime to say whether a method is supported on a certain operating system or not. So a lot of things are only supported on Windows when you use the native console methods. So there's just some things that aren't going to work on a Mac, on Linux, in those places. So you want to be mindful of that. If you want to go the native route, awesome, cool. But keep in mind that you might have to dig into the docs if something's not working as expected to figure out why is it not working. So Spectre.Console, so like I said, I surf GitHub just to surf GitHub. I like finding cool repos and digging through them. I do a weekly blog post of interesting links that I find the previous week. And I always have a section on interesting GitHub repos. And this is one of those ones I found a couple years ago. I was like, oh, Spectre.Console. Again, it's that love of console apps. I'm like, people are doing this. This is sweet. There's another one out there which I want to do a talk on as well. It's called terminal.ui or terminal.gui, which reminds me so much of the work I used to do. back in those quick basic days. But these are updated numbers. I just looked today. So on NuGet, Spectre.Console is about 9.5 million downloads. Around 8.4 thousand stars, 8,400 stars on GitHub. My kids never say 8,400. They always say 8.4K, that kind of stuff. So I had to think for a second here about, I'm always like, why don't you say it like a normal person? Anyway, a lot of stars. It's a cool project, completely open source. And not only do they have a website where you can go for documentation, which we're going to take a look at all of this, and also the actual repository. So I want to do a quick tour of the repo, though, because there's a lot of cool stuff in the repo itself, including a lot of demos. So for a lot of the demos, I may just hit the console and show you some of what they've done, because some of the demos are much better than anything I can come up with. I do have my own, but I do want to point out that there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. I want to jump a slide ahead first, though. Different packages. So the main package, Spectre.Console, is really for a lot of the basics. The CLI library is for if you want to do have your program accept parameters and arguments and those types of things. And then the JSON is obviously its own JSON parsing library. And then image sharp, you can show images. They're what you would expect, right? They're like, I'll see if one of my demos at one time had like my headshot, and I displayed it, and it's 16-bit like image, and it's ugly. You can do a lot of stuff like that, though. But in the repo, if you pull the repo down and you have a version of .NET, which I did not have on this machine today. I had 7, and it worked with 8. .NET Tool Restore, and then .NET Example, and it will give you this awesome list of pre-built examples they ship with the app. So let me see if I can do this without too much disruption. I will make this all easier to see. Give me 1 second. There should be. See, one of the problems we're going to have here with this is I use OMyZ shell. So give me 1 more second. Let me bump fonts, and then we will be on our way here.
I love how customizable that terminal is.
Yeah. It's weird when I get on someone else's machine and it doesn't do the things.
I think it was under text.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
but
it's the bottom. I think you highlighted right now, right?
Yikes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think you'll get the gist of it here. So if I can type now in front of an audience, which I always have a problem with. I got to figure out where there it is. I say I pulled it down today. So there's Spectre.Console. And if I do .NET Example, then it's going to give us a nice display of here are all the examples that ship. Okay, and then they make it really easy where I could say .NET Example, I don't know, emojis. And it's going to build it, and then it'll just run the sample. So you can see that shows a couple of emojis. So there's a lot you can do with this. But the cool thing is, like, it's really easy to go in if you want to know how to do a chart or something like that. Just use their canned examples. I'll show one more, and then we'll get on to the rest of the session. So there's some examples of charts you can do. So the one thing about Spectre.Console is it's really meant for static data. It's really meant for displaying data. It's not meant for writing apps where you can like. You guys remember the old text text mode screens where you can tab between fields and that kind of stuff. It's not that. That would be more like a terminal.gui where you're able to do things like that. Spectre.Console really is meant for static display of data. So let me jump back into here. Cool. So when we talk about Spectre, this is kind of the same thing that I just showed with the native console. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with the native console. I find it a bit tedious, especially if you want to do things like change colors. But it's also like much harder to do if you want to build like tables, or if you wanted to build charts, if you wanted to build things like that. You're doing a lot of work. So Spectre.Console takes a lot of that heavy lifting out of it. So you see here I have a couple of, a plain hello world, one that's not in color, and then you see I actually finished, on the other example, I didn't actually finish the character by character because it was just tedious, and it was going to be an extra however many lines of code, 15 lines of code to change the character color of every character in that word. But you can also bold, you can underline, you can strike through, you can have clickable links. And you can have, oops, get the right place here. You can have blinking text. How cool is that? Y'all remember the blink tag?
Why did that go away again?
And you can, like I said, do things like emojis. So there's a lot you can do with this. So this,
How about marquee? Can I do marquee?
I was thinking it's gonna.
probably wouldn't be hard to build, to be honest, using what's in here. So let me get all sorts of focus issues here. Okay, so here is Spectre doing the same kind of thing that we just did. But some things you'll notice is I'm not using console.writeLine. Now I'm using ANSI console.markupLine. So Spectre.Console has its own markup language based on something called BB code. And so to me, it's very, very cool, very straightforward to use once you kind of get the basics down. So you'll see right here. So this is white on blue. That's really clear. I'm writing white text on a blue background. There it is. And the cool thing, it's just for that line. Like the next line, it's reset. I don't have to do anything special. Yeah.
If you don't have a terminator on it, does it continue on to the next line? Including slash.
No.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't. Right, it should just parse that line, and it'll probably give you an error.
Get errors when you get. It's annoying about that.
Yeah.
Can you nest them? Like, could you have a whole line that's red and then one word bold?
Yeah. It's down just a couple of lines. You can see here this one, green, and then, or even this one. But yeah, you can nest.
Can you nest them so you can have red and then you can have bold within red?
Yes. You can absolutely nest any of the markup that you want. You could underline something you've already done in color. All that kind of stuff is really simple. And you see down here with the clickable link, right? It's just a link tag with the URL, which is kind of neat. And then you have the blink tag, underline, all that kind of stuff. Is really, I was looking to see if I missed anything here, but you can see now. Yeah, the line where I change every character, that is a little bit tedious, but it's still all on one line, still right there. Pretty easy to do, and there's a rich color palette that you can use, which is kind of one of the selling points. But we'll flip back to the website in a couple minutes and look at that. But BB code is what that markup is based on. Oops, if I share the right screen. I can see the screen, you guys can't. So give me a second. So here's the link to the BB code Wikipedia entry. And again, a lot of that you can do. A lot of it's different. Like I said, it's based on it. But if you do go to Spectre.Console and you go to the documentation, then you will see basically the reference for all of that. And again, there are styles. And there's some I didn't show, right? But there are different styles: rapid blink, conceal, which will hide the text. Now that's an interesting one. The conceal works on Windows. It wasn't quite working for me on my Mac today. I didn't spend a bunch of time to dig in, but you can have dim or kind of faded text, that kind of thing. So all sorts of things you can do to use that markup. And kind of once you get the feel for how the markup works, it's pretty intuitive after that. Not a big stretch for how the rest of it works. So some other things you can do are, this would be like an exception was dumped to your console just by .NET, right? No, nothing fancy. There is a style you can apply in Spectre.Console to pretty up your stack trace, which is nice. Much easier to read, much easier to find what you're looking for. So that's kind of neat. One of the big things that I've used it for is things like tables. Now, not that you couldn't build a table using native methods. It'd be really tedious to do. Especially to get the columns to size the right way. So this is one of the demos I have. Some of the code that'll, if it's not on GitHub already, it will be on GitHub. I call a weather service. I pull it down, and I just dump the results to a table. And it's really easy to create a table because you're basically saying, table add, create a table, add the columns, and then add the row. It's that easy to do. So, and they have different tables where it will display the data live. It'll essentially stream it as you're writing it, which is kind of neat. So this, I just write this table and it renders. Because the last call there is an ANSI console.write the table. So I build the object and then I just write it like I would anything else. So I use the tables a lot. And you can see that's an example of calling. You see it uses a spinner too. So lots of things you can do. You can also do, how many have done that? You want to divide something on the screen, so you're doing a bunch of dashes, and then you figure out, did I do enough on this side? And you put your word, then you try to figure out, is this side balanced, right? I've done that so many times to divide data. Well, they make it really easy with a rule object, and it just figures it out. And the interesting thing too is a lot of this will just kind of scale as you resize your screen. It'll do those kinds of things. So lots of interesting widgets that you can use. Calendars. Again, you can't click the calendar. It really is display only. So even though I've highlighted those two dates, I've never tried. That's a good one, but I've never tried to do that. I'll show you how this is built here in a second, and then we can look and see if it makes sense in that code if you could do that. But this is basically bound to, I have a collection with different types of dates I want to show up, right? So holidays and celebrations and deadlines and stuff. And then I just used their bar graph to show those types of things.
Well, I have a question. So with the yellow asterisks, are those such to indicate those of where the holidays are located?
Yeah, so actually I highlighted two dates in October, the 21st, my birthday, and then Halloween. So I probably wrote this demo in October, and I'm like, I'm just going to pick two dates that I know have some meaning. But I'll show you here. Keep looking at that screen because this one is too small for me. My eyes are not that good anymore. So I have a JSON file with a bunch of dates, a bunch of again, like holidays and things, celebrations, deadlines. And I pull that in, and then I kind of go through it and figure out what type it is so that I can color it. So holidays would be red, celebration would be green, deadlines would be blue. That's how I would do it here. And then there's the calendar. So the calendar, I bind it. I essentially loop through and add calendar events, and then I set the highlight style to the yellow bold. So to answer your question, could I do a link in that? I don't think so, but I'm going to try at some point, and I will figure that out. But the calendar itself, I can kind of set the year and the month, and then everything else just happens. So when I go back to this other example, I would do that. If I wanted to have some navigation to go from month to month to month, I would basically set the calendar, the year and the month, and be able to show it that way. But you can see like things like the highlight style, yellow bold. It just makes sense that that's how it works, right? It's like they're not making you do hex codes. They're not making you do, I want the foreground this, the background that. I do want to hit the console, or I want to hit a couple things here. So the first blog post I was telling you guys about was this one, the heart rate calculator. And one of the things that made this really easy, I knew, so this is from Brian's book, Exercises for Programmers. He gives kind of the problem. And I knew that I needed to enter data. But I also knew that I'm a lazy programmer and I didn't want to write a bunch of code to do that kind of stuff. Now, does that defeat the purpose of his exercise? I don't know. So what I did is I started by something simple. So you can see this line here. So one of the ways you can do prompts, you can ask questions at the console. So this would be 2 lines in a traditional console app. I would do a write line, and then I would do a read line or a read to get the value. And then there's a bunch of code that says, okay, is this a valid age?
And you'd have to parse it too.
And I'd have to parse it. So in this case, you can see, number 1, ask, I can give it a type. So by default, it's gonna take ints. Anything else, I'm gonna get some kind of error, which is cool. But then I can do a little bit more, and this is where it really shines for me, is this kind of thing. So there's an ask method. There's also a prompt method, and in this case, how old are you? I want the prompt to show up in green. I have a validation method or a validation message that says if they don't enter the data I'm expecting, I am going to give them this error. It's going to be in red. It's going to say that's not a valid age. And then I say, because this is a heart rate calculator, I wanted to put some constraints around it. So at the lower end, you got to be at least 16, and at the high end, 101, right, is kind of the high end. If you're over 101 and you're looking for your heart rate, I don't know. But then it just says that hey, there's a success, right? So you can see same thing here, right? This is what's your resting heart rate, and so I had to ask a couple questions. So there's a pattern here on how I'm asking these questions, and that's what I like about this. I'm not having to rewrite. Here's a console write line. Here's a console read line. Here's all my parsing code. It does it for me. And you can see, yeah, that was an int. This is an int. What's your resting heart rate? Now this one, the validation's a little bit different. I don't know anyone that's got a resting heart rate of 20. I would assume that's not good. Yeah.
When it's doing the validation, if I put in a resting heart rate of 10, would it error and stop, or would I re-enter and try again?
I'll show you how that works. I'll run through this here in just a second. So you see here for the resting heart rate, I had a bottom end of 20 and a top end of 101 for resting heart rate. Again, are those good numbers? Would a doctor look at that and say, you're good? Probably not, but I needed something, and those seem good to me. So I just want to jump through this a little bit. And then, so the output, right, I create the table, and you can see that's just the headers. Really simple, create the table, add the column, done. And then when I'm ready to add data to the table, I just do a dot add row, and there's the output. It was right, like if I had to try to do, I could dump that data out and just do tabs, right, myself, without all the headers and without the nice lines around it. And you can change the style of this. You can do all sorts of styling about these tables, what they look like when they come out. But again, I could do a lot of this myself, but this would be, if I wanted it to look nice like this, it'd be a lot of work to do it manually. And so here's kind of what the whole thing looks like when it's all said and done. And you can see I had some green, and this was 2 years ago, so I wonder if anything's changed. I assume if I put my current age, but yeah. So to answer your question, what happens is, bear with me just for a second here. The program will keep going, right? Is probably the big piece there. So what it'll do is it will say, and I'm not sure what their example is going to show. It'll take me a minute to pull mine up, but if I enter something that's outside of the range of the validation, and here's another one, right? I can do list selections like this, but it will essentially say, hey, sorry. So here's one. What's your favorite sport? Now, what you see here is this is saying these are options, and it will default to. It'll have a default. So I'm going to put. You can see it says that's not a sport, and it'll ask me again. Again, if I was doing this manually, I'm going to have a loop, and I'm going to say, I'm going to keep showing this until you give me valid data. Now, I don't care what Spectre.Console is doing behind the scenes. As long as it's making my life easier, I really don't care. But it's things like this this is a block of code. One block of code that sets up the prompt, that sets up my validation, and I'm done. And I'm not having to go back and oh, you entered something invalid, loop, redisplay it. So if I put hockey, and then here's another good one. So if I do something for it, it says, how old are you? I'm going to put in a string. That's not a valid age. Let's put 255. You must be younger than the oldest person alive. Makes sense. And I think if I do 0, you must be at least 1 year old, right? So it puts those constraints in, and it'll keep asking me until I give it a valid age.
Will it take hex or other bases?
No. They're generic methods, so you give it a type and it will enforce that type. But you can see here.
You could write your own validators. You could write your own string hex validator probably. You need a converter to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot more code that's involved if you're going to get outside of kind of what they ship.
Yep.
But you can see here at the bottom of the screen, enter a password, so it'll mask entry. And so, the first one was stars, the second one were dashes for the mask. The last one didn't put anything for a mask, it just let me type. So you can't look over someone's shoulder and see how long their password is or whatever it is. Here's one that's an optional question, so I don't have to answer it. And then you can see there's everything I just entered in this, right? And so this is their example. And so in my demos, I've stolen some of that code. So when I had to do the age for the heart rate, right? I looked, well, how did they do it? Because there's not many ways you're going to do it differently. So I snagged that code, that kind of thing. So there's all sorts of things you can do with that. But if I go back to the example, a couple things I did want to show that I want to show colors. So if we're talking about kind of the color palette. So it's there's a lot that you can do with colors. So you can do real simple colors, and you can go all the way up to 24-bit colors and put them in. And those probably are hex codes that you put in. But so lots that you can do there. And then I want to show a couple others. The things that I really get the most value out of are things like the tables. But you can do, there's lots of different ways to show status or progress, I guess. So you can do things like this.
Oh, wow.
So again, if you're building something for a client or a customer or your employer, and or even if it's just a tool for you as a developer and you want to process some data and you want to know where it's at in this processing, it's a good way to do it. Otherwise, what do most of us do? We're going to have some loop, and we're going to have something, if x mod 10 equals 0, we're going to print out a status message, right? We're going to do things like that. So these types of things are really cool that they give us, and they're really easy to implement. And then I think another one that I think is really cool. Let's do the links, because this way you guys can see what happens when I actually click on a link. So this is going to be the author's blog. Now I'm holding command down to activate the link, but I can do that. And this is going to go to Patrick's website. He's the author of Spectre.Console. But you could do anything you wanted there. So again, lots of really cool stuff. I want to show you the live table, because this is another one that's really cool. And so you can see there the table's being loaded with data, and it's kind of scrolling, and you're seeing it live, which I think is kind of neat. And I just Control-C to get out of it. But the point is, there's a lot you can do with Spectre.Console. The other one I did want to show is I wanted to show this one, because it does format and render JSON really well. So like on my Mac, I use a program called BAT. The cat is the default for displaying a file. I use one called BAT, which does very similar things. But if I wanted to write that for myself, it'd be pretty simple, because it does do a good job of formatting JSON, that kind of stuff. And I've dumped huge JSON files into this, and it handles it really well. So things to think about with this. And then I was trying to think if there's any other gotchas here of things. Oh, this is the one I like using too. Is the Figlet. Right? Who doesn't like that kind of stuff, right? That just takes you back. But this is the kind of stuff, like if I'm just hacking around on my own thing and I'm just kind of bored, this is what I'll do for like the header, like, hey, Mike's cool app. Because, I mean, who's going to, sure, you could write a method to do that, right? Pass the letter. And I've had to do the opposite of that for a pair programming interview where I had ASCII numbers, and I had to like print it out like that, and I had to print out what the actual number was. So that was a fun one.
Does this have images in this?
In this demo, if not, I will.
Yeah, I know the documentation has it. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So and again, the images.
Canvas probably. Sorry.
Canvas. You're right, Matt. It probably is. Let me do Canvas. Yeah. So there are your images. Okay. So.
Will it convert any image to 16-bit? Or is this just a cheap 16-bit converter? I've passed into this for my own hacking around. So one, on the weather API I use, it'll give me back
like weather icons and stuff.
Yep.
I've had it render those. That looks pretty good. Like I said, I tried to do like an actual photo. It looks like ass,
Yep.
as you would expect.
Yep.
That's key, right?
Don't quit your day job.
Can we see the trees example?
Yeah, for sure. And so, the point is they make, and so you can see this. This is even a tree control with a calendar nested in it. And so you can nest these widgets within other widgets. So there's a table and there's a calendar. One of the things I've done is directory listings, right? So you grab your file system object, you grab the files, and then you kind of dump it out. That's a cool exercise to do to use our tree control. A lot of it's around that performance of like what makes sense and what doesn't. Let's see. Oh, so let's just do charts because why not? So that's the charts one I showed earlier. I thought there was another one.
What was the cursor one?
So the cursor one is weird, and I'm not sure it works as expected on my Mac because so what it says is demonstrates how to move the cursor. And so when I do that here, and I wish I had my Windows machine to see what the difference is. I don't see it do anything. Unless it was to move the cursor over, so those aren't actually spaces, it just move the cursor to a different location.
On the text cursor, yeah.
So
Could you accomplish something akin to the more or the less command, like in whatever you're displaying, where you can move up and down, or is that just you're going to pipe it somewhere or use the console window to do something?
I'm trying. So there's
Like a
no
scrollable area.
there's that I've seen. There's no unless Matt has seen it. There's no scrollable area. It's just going to take the screen, and you'll have to scroll your normal.
You could do it with live, but it'd be a decent bit of work.
So
We saw it was overwriting stuff that was previously displayed, like it was giving you a live feed, it was maintaining it within the chart. So I feel like there's got to be a way.
It has some ways with screens and layouts for like advanced UI.
yeah, and
Simple lines.
the good thing is, so these are the panels. Good thing is, those types of questions, certainly. Well, here's one thing we could do. So this is an example I was playing with earlier, right? So this is if I wanted to. Well, that's probably not big enough. So I use JetBrains Rider as my IDE because it's awesome. But can I just do a command? Oh, I can do Command++. Look at that. Good job, JetBrains. So this is kind of a traditional, if I wanted to parse the arguments that were passed into a .NET application. You're going to use the args, and you're going to go through it. And so what this says is, if an argument starts with a dash, then I'm going to look for a dash H or dash help or dash V or dash version. Otherwise, I'm going to say unknown option, right? So that's kind of how I've done this traditionally if I needed to accept command line parameters. So I was curious. So I used GitHub Copilot to say, what would that look like if this were Spectre.Console? And so it definitely cleaned it up a lot on what it would do for this. But we could do the same kind of thing, like, and I'm not good at prompts, so just bear with me here. Spectre.Console, can I have a scrollable view area? We'll see what it says. I have no idea.
I bet you can't with screens and layouts.
You probably can. Yes, you can. Scrollable view area by using the panel class along with the scroll method. So there you go. So you create a new panel and set .scroll on it. Call .scroll with vertical or horizontal. So
Yeah.
this is so let's do this.
we go. So bear with me here for a second. Yeah. We're gonna install it. Okay.
Yeah.
Most things I do in with NuGet, I do at the console, so that's why I never do it through the UI. So let's see now. Why is it complaining about that?
I'm not sure scroll is actually a method.
Well, so that could be too, right? So that could be too.
But there should be.
Are you telling me that it's hallucinating? So
That's my suspicion, yeah.
So let's go look and see. Panel.
Pull request.
Maybe.
But I think
Or
you
panel.
might be able to do it with layout or screen though.
Right. There's probably a way to do it. I was excited there for a second. I thought maybe I didn't get screwed over by AI.
Modeling language, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Hold on. I have to do something here. I have to give this. Oh, can I not rate it? Like, yes, I can. Thumbs down. Okay. Good to know. So a couple other when I was doing this last year's blog post, I did the same kind of thing here. So this one was calculating credit card payoff, and this was actually a fun one because this is the formula that Brian gave for how to solve this. That probably took me the longest of anything in this app to figure out how to make that in C#. But it's the same. I do the same kind of stuff. So you can see here in this case, my prompt, I'm looking for the APR, so it's a double. And I give my my validation, my ranges. Same thing with the card balance, how much do you pay each month, and then so there's that ends up being all that. So that was a fun one because that's intimidating for me. I'm not a math guy, so that was when I first looked at that. I'm like, I'm not going to do this one. But I didn't do anything fancy with the output here, other than have it be Christmassy type colors. So that was another fun one to do. And then this one was another fun one, which was calling another API. There's a guy out there who maintains an API. Just a guy. This is not an official NASA thing. Just a guy who maintains a list of all the people in space at any given time. So kind of neat. And his API is really simple to use. And so a lot of background there. But I ended up calling his API and kind of dumping out. So at the time, when it was last December, those were all the people who were on the ISS. So there were 7 people. But if there were people en route, it would show them the spacecraft they're in, all those kinds of things. So, but Spectre, to me, it just saves so much time. There's so many things I don't have to do that I would have to do in a traditional application that I'll keep using it. I do want to show one other thing here because I think this one's cool. So Spectre again is for all that static data you have. And I always forget if it's terminal.ui or terminal.gui. So bear with me here for a second. There we go. This one. So this one is a little bit different. This lets you create apps like that. And so I had hoped to incorporate some of this into this talk, but I ran out of time. But this is the stuff that excites me for being able to build an app, because this is what I used to build. Were apps that look like that. So I could probably use a combination of the two. And there are things that Terminal GUI have that obviously Spectre doesn't, and there are things Spectre has that this doesn't. But you can see here they do the same kinds of things. And man, anyone else write quick basic apps back in the day? Yeah.
I actually have an inbox copy of Visual Basic for DOS.
I had Mine, I have mine on the 5.5, 4 or 5.5, whatever they were. That's awesome. Yeah, Visual Basic for DOS was an interesting one, but QBasic, QuickBasic, or that's where I came up, and so I see stuff like that, and I just am excited about it. So again, this is another one. If you're building console apps, another library you could possibly use. But Spectre.Console, if you get a chance, check it out. Go out, hit the website. The docs are awesome. I had originally started building. My original intent for this talk last year, when I first started building this particular talk, was to do all of my slides in Spectre. And I actually have a fair amount of it done. It just got so tedious. But I had all the, I could hit spacebar and hit advanced slides, and hit arrow and go back, and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to figure out a way to make that like consume some JSON that had the content for the slides, that kind of thing. But my demos, let me just, I want to go through a couple of these because they're kind of fun. So, .NET Run. So if you guys knew this, and if you do .NET Run on an app and you want to pass in parameters, you just have to do a couple of dashes, and then you can pass in your args. And, oh yeah. I'll get it right at some point. Let me look at the program. CS. I'll show you. The code is ugly because this started out as being a program.cs. It started out as it's very ugly, but this shows how to do kind of all those things in one place. That way I can just pass in args and say do this, do that, and yeah, it's there. So. But I don't know if I have everything here because I pulled this down off my OneDrive. So so this is a JSON of some weather data, and then I have this one, which is a ton of weather data, and this is old, but so this is what I was consuming for some of it instead of hitting the live APIs. I'm having it dumb right now. I don't know what I'm. So what happens when you go off script. What I wanted to show though is that in the kind of in mine, can't type program. There we go. In mine, what I did is I had an initial set of here's how you do it in the standard. The native framework, and then here's how you do it in Spectre. So things like reading from a file and displaying in JSON, right? So you just create a JSON text object, pass it in your data, and then you write it out, and that's all you had to do. The rules are interesting. The calendar is interesting. So those are just different things that when I was doing this, I was just playing, and I think that's the one I want. So, it all comes down to learning a few commands. Instead of console.writeLine, you're going to use ANSI console.writeLine, and learning some of the what are the methods? Ask, prompt, write, those types of things. Markup line is another one, and then learning how to use the different markup. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot to it. And what you can see, so here's how you do the exception. ANSI console has a write exception method, so if I get an exception, I pass it in, and that's what does the formatting. And you can override some of the formatting for the exceptions. There's a lot you can do to kind of override some of the default styles and those types of things. Where am I at here? So We are at 7:06, just about an hour. Any questions?
Yeah, are there any other console types? There's ANSI console, is there any other console types?
Nope. Nope. It's just ANSI console.
So I saw you kind of intermingle console.writeline and anti-console.do stuff. Is
Right.
this a style choice? Or?
So the console write lines, if I wasn't using Spectre, I was just using native. I have a shortcut, the CW tab. So it was just, so if I'm just outputting plain text, I don't plan on formatting it. That's why I did that.
Okay.
That's why they were kind of intermixed. You could do all ANSI console.writeline. I just didn't because.
Mike, can we extend the markup language to send other ANSI escape codes?
I'll see the way too.
I do not believe so. The other thing I did want to show, and I sort of showed it, was I told you there's a whole other .CLI library for the commands. You create a command app, those types of things. There are lots of libraries that do that stuff. Is Spectre better than those or not? I don't know. It's all kind of a wash for me for how you do the commands and parameters and arguments and those types of things. But yeah, no, to answer, I don't believe you can extend the BB code or the markup other than potentially looking at the code and submitting a pull request.
You may be able to just write it straight in.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. If I just send a cursor placement sequence,
Yeah.
So one question, I guess you're obviously running it, in your iTerms, but you said that one of the limitations of using the native methods was that it doesn't support certain platforms. So this, I'm assuming, just detects what OS you're on and sends like the right, control characters for your terminal or whatever.
Yep.
The one thing I've seen it not be able to do is if I'm running a Spectre.Console app inside of a VS Code prompt, depending on what my shell is in VS Code, like it doesn't support like the interactive stuff with the up downs. That's like the one limitation I've seen because I'm running it on Windows and Linux, and it works pretty reliably across platform for me.
Yeah.
The default one in Visual Studio Code. So it's just it's a non-interactive one by default. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, there are some things that when I first did this, it was all on Windows. That's where I wrote it was all on Windows. And I do so much on the Mac. Like I said, the only thing I've seen so far of all these demos that hasn't worked as expected was the one method for, or the style for conceal. That's the only one I saw that didn't quite work. Otherwise, everything else was pretty dead on, which is nice because that's kind of what we want to be able to do is write an app on one and have it run on the other places. I've not tried to run it on native Linux because I don't have a VM spun up like Ubuntu or one of those. Yeah, I would assume it would run anywhere that .NET runs. Anything else?
The table functionality, like I've used LinkPad, and there's a .dump method that it can just take the properties of a list of things and just blast them out of the table. Would you have to write code to do that?
Yeah, you would have to, because it would have to know what to do.
There's an extension for it actually. I bumped into this on Twitter. Like the creator of the extension found me. It's like, no, there's an extension for it.
Nice.
So, yeah, there's a dump for it.
Nice. Yeah, LinkPad is nice. Yeah. I don't know many people that use it anymore, but that's always a handy method to do. Anything else? All right. Thank you all so much for sitting through this.
Thank you, Mike. That was awesome. So I am remembering my three apps that I built with Spectre.Console. The first one was when I was talking to Mike last year. I needed to put together a workshop for people. It was my first workshop. I needed something that would work cross-platform for folks. Usually, when I'm trying to demo something, I kind of default to like the Windows world and WPF app or whatever, right? WinUI, something like that. I'm like, well, no, there's gonna be people in the audience who have Macs or whatever, right? And so I'm like, well, I need something easy cross-platform. So Spectre was my guy, and I was able to use that just to show like all these Azure AI services and semantic kernel and stuff like that. So it was really good for a quick demo. Thank you, Alan. I've been building a command line app that just takes in like the command app stuff for various little things. So I'm using that for like little apps for weather and current conditions and things like that. It's a lot of fun.
I have an app that I use that hits Azure DevOps to pull back like open pull requests and those types of things. And the reason I didn't demo it tonight is I don't have enough data in my own AZDO instance to have made it worth showing.
Yeah.
So, but it's that kind of stuff, right? I want to pull down all these PRs.
Little things, yeah.
Yeah, little things.
Yeah, but you add them up together and you get this really cool thing over time. And then I built one from a client and I actually used the Figment text up there. So my client is launching it and they see like their name in ASCII art and they're like, "Wait, you spent your time on what now?" I'm like, no, it's a line of code, guys. It's fine. But we actually use that to show like the progress as you're training a machine learning model, and then print out a confusion matrix for a classification algorithm, and let the user select between it. It's all this great stuff. It's like, okay, I could focus on building my app instead of on the mechanics of parsing and prompting and selecting. It's wonderful. All right, so we have